This presentation introduces Urban Ecological Networks, UEN, as a planning framework for enhancing biodiversity and ecological connectivity in cities. It outlines key structural elements, including core areas, ecological corridors, buffer zones, and stepping stones, and highlights the role of GIS-based analysis in mapping habitats, connectivity, and species needs. The integration of ecological networks into urban policy, land use regulation, and climate adaptation strategies is emphasized, along with the importance of governance and stakeholder collaboration. Case studies from the River Isar restoration in Munich and the Emerald Necklace and Boston Greenway system in Boston illustrate how ecological connectivity can be embedded in practical urban design and planning. Define the structure and function of urban ecological networks. Learn how to map and design core areas, corridors, and buffer zones. Explore integration of urban ecological networks into spatial planning and policy frameworks. Urban ecological networks, UENs, are designed to connect green spaces, natural habitats, and ecosystem functions within cities. They aim to enhance biodiversity, maintain ecological processes, and provide ecosystem services while supporting human well-being and sustainable urban development. Core areas within the urban ecological network form the backbone of urban ecological networks. They consist of relatively large, high-quality green spaces such as urban parks, forests, wetlands, and protected natural areas that can sustain viable populations of species over time. These areas provide essential ecological functions including breeding, foraging, shelter, and refuge from urban disturbance. In addition, core areas deliver key ecosystem services such as climate regulation, stormwater retention, and carbon storage. Because of their size and ecological integrity, core areas act as biodiversity reservoirs and sources for species dispersal into surrounding urban landscapes. Their protection is critical, as fragmentation or degradation can lead to population decline and reduced ecological resilience. Urban planning strategies therefore emphasize the conservation, enhancement, and connectivity of core habitats to ensure long-term biodiversity and ecosystem stability. Ecological corridors are linear landscape elements that connect core areas and enable the movement of species, genetic exchange, and ecological processes across urban environments. In cities, corridors commonly include riparian zones, greenways, canals, railway verges, and tree-lined streets. Riparian corridors are especially valuable because they support both terrestrial and aquatic species while also contributing to flood mitigation and water quality improvement. Urban greenways serve multifunctional roles by combining ecological connectivity with recreation and non-motorized mobility. The effectiveness of corridors depends on factors such as width, vegetation structure, continuity, and disturbance levels. When integrated into green infrastructure networks, corridors significantly reduce habitat fragmentation and enhance urban biodiversity. Buffer zones and transition areas provide gradual interfaces between core habitats and intensive urban land uses. These areas help reduce negative edge effects such as noise, light pollution, invasive species, and human disturbance. Typical examples include low-intensity recreational landscapes, semi-natural parks, and extensive green spaces surrounding protected habitats. Ecologically, buffer zones stabilize core habitats by moderating microclimatic extremes and reducing environmental stress. They also offer supplementary habitat for generalist species and facilitate movement within the ecological network. In urban planning, buffer zones are essential for balancing conservation objectives with development pressures and require coordinated land use regulation and long-term management. Stepping stones are small, spatially distributed habitat patches that support species movement across fragmented urban landscapes. Examples include pocket parks, community gardens, street greenery, vegetated traffic islands, and rooftop gardens. While individually limited in size, these elements collectively increase landscape permeability by providing resting, feeding, or breeding opportunities for mobile species. In dense urban areas where continuous corridors are difficult to establish, stepping stones play a critical role in maintaining functional connectivity. Green roofs and rooftop gardens add a vertical dimension to ecological networks, compensating for limited ground-level green space. When designed with native vegetation, stepping stones contribute to biodiversity conservation, climate adaptation, and urban resilience. Data-driven design is the cornerstone of successful urban planning. The creation of a functional network requires more than simply setting aside green space. It demands a rigorous, evidence-based approach using specialized tools to analyze complex spatial relationships between species and their environment. These analytical methods are strategically vital as they transform ecological theory into defensible, on-the-ground conservation action. By quantifying habitat suitability, modeling species movement, and identifying critical landscape patterns, these tools enable planners to prioritize conservation efforts, design effective corridors, and justify planning decisions in a scientifically robust manner. Mapping and spatial analysis tools are essential for urban ecological network planning. Geographic information systems, based habitat suitability, and connectivity models help identify areas that provide essential resources for species and determine movement pathways. These models highlight gaps where connectivity is insufficient and suggest optimal locations for corridors and restoration areas. Land use overlays visualize urban development patterns alongside ecological data, allowing planners to identify potential conflicts or synergies. Landscape metrics, such as patch size, edge density, and connectivity indices, quantify habitat fragmentation and help prioritize areas for intervention. Finally, analyzing biodiversity hotspots and species-specific needs ensures that the network supports ecologically meaningful areas and species requirements. Geographic information systems, GIS-based habitat and connectivity models combine habitat suitability mapping, where suitable habitats occur, with connectivity modeling, how individuals or genes move between habitat patches. Using spatial data such as land cover, elevation, roads and species records, these models create resistant surfaces, corridors and flow maps that support conservation planning and environmental impact assessment. The scientific basis for designing an urban ecological network, UN, lies in identifying where species can survive and reproduce. Ecologists use habitat suitability models, HSMs, and species distribution models, SDMs, to estimate a species' realized ecological niche by linking field observations with environmental variables such as climate, land cover, and topography. The models predict potential species distributions across landscapes and help identify core habitat areas that can form the backbone of ecological networks. For planners, HSM maps serve as hypothesis maps that highlight high-value conservation areas and potential development risks, helping guide spatial planning decisions and trade-offs. Model development relies on statistical approaches, such as generalized linear models, GLMs, to describe relationships between species presence and environmental conditions. Model selection methods like the Ecological Information Criterion, AIC, help identify the most parsimonious model, one that explains patterns using the fewest variables. This helps avoid overfitting, ensuring the model remains reliable for predicting future habitat suitability and supporting evidence-based planning decisions. To understand the urban environment as a functional ecosystem, planners use geographic information systems, GIS, to overlay maps of different land uses, such as parks, residential areas, industrial zones, and remnant forests. This reveals the city as a mosaic of habitats with varying potential to support biodiversity. Based on landscape ecology principles, an urban ecological network, UN, is structured around core areas, ecological corridors, and buffer zones. To evaluate how effectively this network functions, planners apply landscape metrics that describe its spatial structure. These metrics measure factors such as habitat patch size, their isolation, and the degree of connectivity between them. The analysis helps determine whether ecological processes and species movement can occur across the landscape and identifies areas where restoration or improved connectivity is needed. Key landscape metrics used in UN planning include patch size and density, the area of habitat patches and their number within a landscape. Larger patches generally support more stable populations and greater biodiversity. Edge effects, boundaries between different land uses can increase predation, disturbance and environmental stress in fragmented habitats. Patch shape complexity, compact shapes reduce edge effects compared with elongated or irregular patches. Isolation, proximity, the distance between habitat patches. Lower isolation improves species dispersal, colonization and gene flow, increasing ecosystem resilience. Despite intense human pressure, urban areas can function as biodiversity hotspots. This is largely due to the high variety of habitats and microhabitats found within cities. This habitat mosaic, which includes everything from remnant native forests and wetlands to parks, gardens, and formerly developed or industrial sites undergoing natural succession, can support a surprisingly high number of both native and non-native species. It is not uncommon for large cities to contain a significant percentage of the regional species pool. For instance, more than 50% of the flora of Belgium can be found in Brussels, and 50% of vertebrates and 65% of birds of Poland occur in Warsaw. However, to create a network that is truly functional for wildlife, it is critical to move beyond a generic green space approach and consider the unique needs of different species. For example, a narrow park corridor may be perceived as 100% edge habitat, and thus uninhabitable for a species like an ovenbird, which requires deep forest interior habitat. In contrast, a species like an American robin, which thrives on edges, will find that same corridor ideal. Effective UNs must be designed with an understanding of these species' specific requirements, including habitat specialization and dispersal abilities, to ensure the network provides the right resources and connections, turning a simple green plan into a living, breathing ecosystem. This detailed ecological understanding provides the necessary foundation for translating a technical blueprint into effective urban policy. A well-designed map of an urban ecological network is only the first step. The success of any urban ecological network hinges on its integration into the fabric of urban governance and public life. A plan that exists only on paper cannot protect a single corridor from development or restore a degraded habitat. The most effective way to ensure the long-term viability of a UN is to incorporate its goals into a city's comprehensive or master plans. Because urbanization is one of the main drivers of the threat to global biodiversity, this strategic integration serves as a direct countermeasure, elevating biodiversity conservation from an afterthought to a guiding principle for all future development. High-level ecological targets can be written into the plan, such as preserving a certain percentage of remnant native vegetation, mandating the maintenance of functional habitat connectivity between core natural areas, establishing clear, measurable objectives for restoration and conservation initiatives. By embedding these goals at the highest level of urban planning, cities ensure that ecological considerations are weighed alongside economic and social factors in every major land use decision. This approach provides a durable, long-term vision that guides growth in a way that protects and enhances the city's natural assets for generations to come. The broad goals established in a master plan are translated into tangible, on-the-ground action through enforceable regulations. Ecological zoning is a key tool for this, allowing planners to designate sensitive areas, remnant habitats, and critical corridors for protection from harmful development. The development of such zoning maps is often informed by biotope mapping, a method used to systematically classify and evaluate urban habitats based on their ecological characteristics, such as vegetation structure, age, species composition, and degree of human influence. The resulting biotope maps provide the fine-grained spatial data needed to delineate conservation zones, and inform the development of specific land use codes and ordinances. Beyond zoning, land use codes provide a powerful regulatory mechanism to mandate small-scale restoration practices across the entire city. By requiring biodiversity-friendly practices in all new developments, these codes can effectively turn the development process into an engine for ecological enhancement. Such regulations can require developers to use native plant species in landscaping to provide food and shelter for local wildlife, preserve mature trees and existing vegetation on development sites, incorporate features like green roofs or permeable pavements to reduce environmental impact. Together, these regulatory tools form the rulebook that transforms the vision of a connected ecological network into a daily reality of urban development and management. Urban ecological networks are not just about protecting wildlife, they are a critical form of green infrastructure that delivers a wide array of benefits to human residents. By integrating humans with frameworks for climate adaptation and ecosystem services, cities can build resilience and improve public well-being. The dual benefits of this integrated approach are powerful and synergistic. For example, a well-managed network of urban forests and wetlands can simultaneously provide habitat for biodiversity, buffer the city against climate impacts, and deliver essential services to its population. Cities are critical arenas for biodiversity conservation. Urban-rural gradients. Species richness often peaks in the urban fringe, an area of high heterogeneity and intermediate disturbance. The proportion of non-native species tends to increase towards the city center. Integrating biodiversity into urban design, strategies include creating green spaces, school gardening to foster environmental awareness, and designing urban infrastructure to be more wildlife-friendly. Historic domestic gardens can act as reservoirs of cultural and biological diversity. Restoring habitats on urban structures, such as creating grasslands on rooftops for ground-nesting birds, is an emerging practice. Post-industrial landscapes, spontaneous succession on mined lands, and other wastelands can create valuable biotope mosaics, offering habitats for endangered species. Near-natural restoration methods, such as applying seed-rich green hay, can accelerate these processes where needed to control erosion. Achieving these integrated benefits requires strong governance and a commitment to managing urban green spaces not as isolated amenities, but as a cohesive, high-performing ecological system. Urban ecological network planning requires coordination among multiple stakeholders, including government agencies, urban planners, ecologists, developers, and local communities. Multi-level governance ensures that ecological objectives are implemented consistently across local, regional, and national scales. Engaging stakeholders increases ownership and long-term stewardship. Community involvement in monitoring, maintenance, and planning ensures that networks are functional and socially accepted. Stakeholder participation also raises awareness and encourages urban residents to adopt behaviors that support ecological sustainability. The restoration of the Isar River in Munich represents a strong example of an urban ecological network structured around a riparian corridor. The Isar functions as a linear ecological backbone connecting alpine, peri-urban, and urban habitats, supporting species movement, sediment dynamics, and biodiversity across scales. Historically fragmented by channelization, hydropower infrastructure, and flood protection works, the river corridor lost ecological continuity and habitat diversity. The Isar Restoration Project reintroduced natural river morphology, widened floodplains, reconnected side channels, and restored riparian vegetation, thereby enhancing longitudinal and lateral connectivity within the urban landscape. From an urban ecological network perspective, the restored river corridor acts as a multifunctional ecological corridor linking core habitats, providing stepping-stone habitats such as gravel bars and riparian forests, and supporting fish migration through bypass systems. The project integrates biodiversity conservation, flood mitigation, recreation, and climate adaptation, demonstrating how nature-based solutions can replace gray infrastructure. Importantly, the ESAR case highlights governance and social participation as key drivers of ecological connectivity, showing that long-term urban ecological networks depend not only on spatial design, but also on collaborative planning and policy integration. The Emerald Necklace in Boston represents an early and influential example of an urban ecological network structured around hydrological and landscape connectivity. Designed by Frederick Law Olmsted in the late 19th century, the system links a series of parks, wetlands, ponds, and river corridors into a continuous green network that integrates sanitation, flood control, recreation, and ecological functions. Central to the network is the Muddy River system, which connects the Charles River, Back Bay Fens, Riverway, Olmsted Park, Jamaica Pond, Arnold Arboretum, and Franklin Park, functioning as a linear ecological corridor within a dense urban context. From an urban ecological network perspective, the Emerald Necklace combines large core areas with riparian corridors and transitional landscapes that reduce fragmentation and support ecological processes. Recent restoration projects, such as daylighting buried river sections, removing infrastructure barriers, and reconnecting previously severed park segments, have strengthened both ecological connectivity and flood resilience. The system also delivers key ecosystem services, including stormwater retention, climate regulation, and urban cooling, while maintaining strong social and cultural value. Long-term governance by the Emerald Necklace Conservancy demonstrates how coordinated management and public engagement are essential for sustaining urban ecological networks over time. Planning for urban ecological networks, UANs, is a complex, interdisciplinary process that combines ecological science, strategic planning, and effective governance. Successful networks are the result of deliberate planning that translates ecological knowledge into protected and functional landscapes. UANs enhance biodiversity, resilience, and quality of life. The primary goal of a UAN is to conserve biodiversity in urbanizing landscapes. Well-designed networks of interconnected habitats support viable species populations, increase native biodiversity, and reduce the risk of local extinctions caused by fragmentation. At the same time, these networks strengthen urban resilience by providing ecosystem services such as stormwater regulation, water purification, and mitigation of the urban heat island effect. Accessible green spaces also improve urban quality of life by offering opportunities for recreation, stress reduction, and contact with nature. Success depends on cross-scale planning and data-driven design. Ecological processes operate across multiple spatial scales, from local site conditions to regional landscape dynamics. Effective UAN planning must integrate these scales, ensuring that individual habitat patches function as part of a larger ecological network. Scientific tools such as habitat suitability models, landscape metrics, and connectivity analyzers help planners identify core habitats, prioritize ecological corridors, and guide conservation investments. Strong governance and stakeholder participation are essential. The long-term effectiveness of a UAN requires clear legal protection, coordinated policies, and stable funding. Successful planning also depends on collaboration among government agencies, landowners, communities, and other stakeholders. Inclusive participation helps build consensus, incorporate local knowledge, and ensure long-term stewardship and adaptive management of the network.